I was about 7 years old at the time. My sisters and I were taking a nap, and I remember waking up when listening a discussion that my parents were having in the back of the house. I walked down the hallway that separated the bedrooms from the kitchen dining room, and I meet my maternal grandmother, who was standing right behind the window curtains, spying on my parents. I asked her, "Grandma, what are you doing?" And she, realizing my presence, turned her head, and looking at me with contempt he tells me, "Shh, silence girl meddler." I opened the door to go see my parents, and at the entrance, about 2 steps from the door, I stepped, without realizing it, a mound of earth. At that moment, my grandmother took me by the arm and told me, "Look what you did, girl meddler."
A big greeting to everyone and welcome to a new video. On this occasion, us reunites the story of Brenda, a young woman from Idaho, who went through countless health problems, due to the evil of a person very nearby to her. Before starting with the story, I ask everyone to subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed. Leave a comment and a like if you liked the video, and share the video as much as possible. Since this helps 𝐭𝐫 channel grow and the video reach many more people. Now yes, let's start with today's story. My name is Brenda, and as I told you, I am originally from Idaho, although now at 39 years old I am married and very happy living in California. When I was a child, I lived with my 2 sisters and my parents in a small town where everyone knew each other. I remember that, for certain dates or holidays, it was very common for neighborhood families to organize and put together a lunch in the center of the street. With what I'm telling you, I just want to make it clear that although I suffered from health problems for a long time, the memories of my childhood are quite happy. We had good neighbors and better schoolmates. I remember that one spring, we had a visit from my maternal grandmother, and although my mother was extremely affectionate and attentive to her 3 daughters and her husband, there was nothing good to say about my maternal grandmother. When one saw her, you could see the contempt and the resentment on his face. One day, my sisters and I were taking a nap. I woke up because I'd listened arguing to my parents. Needless to say, that it was something rare that they argue among themselves. I got out of bed and, barefoot, I headed towards the back of the home. I crossed the hallway that separated the rooms from the kitchen diner, and upon entering the kitchen, I see my grandmother spying through the cracks of the window blind. At that moment, I ask her, "Grandma, what are you doing?" To which she turns her head, and with a look of hatred and contempt, or at least that's how I felt, she tells me, "Shh, silence girl meddler." To all this, I open the door at the back of the house to go see my parents. And when I go out, about 2 steps from the front door, I step on, and without realizing it, a mound of earth that was there. My grandmother comes out after me, and takes my arm telling me, "Look what you did, girl meddler." At that moment, I see my mother who is approaching, and my grandmother lets go of my arm. When my mother reaches where I and my grandmother were, my mother tells me, "Hi my love. What happened that you woke up from your nap?" And when she looks at me barefoot, she asks me, "And that land?" To which my grandmother, without letting me speak, tells her, "This little girl of yours is doing mischief and gathering grime." My mom looks at my grandmother and says, "Well, they're children, it's not something that's serious." My mom sends me inside the house and tells me, "Go to the bathroom. After cleaning up this dirt, I'm going to give you a shower." After that, the day passed completely normally. I remember that it was a Saturday, given that my grandmother had arrived on Friday for the morning and was supposed to stay until Sunday. But without prior notice, my grandmother decided to pack her bags and return to her hometown that same afternoon. To me and to my sisters, didn't care much about her early departure. In fact, I can say that we were actually happy. since we noticed that she didn't appreciate us at all. In end, that night, like every night, we went to sleep around 10 at night, waiting for some tale or story that our father used to us narrate, which allowed us to relax and sleep in total tranquility. I remember that I fell asleep without realizing it, but at 3 or 4 of the dawning I woke up for the screams of terror of my parents. I felt my mother lift me up in her arms, and I realized that my whole body was shaking as if I were convulsing. At that moment, I was aware of the whole situation, but no matter how much I wanted to talk, I couldn't utter a single word. My mother hurriedly ran with me in her arms to the back of the car, where my father was waiting for us with the car ready to go depart. At that instant I faded, and I no longer knew anything about myself.
I remember waking up in a bed of hospital, and seeing my dad talking to the doctor while my mommy caressed my forehead. I asked my mom what had happened, and she just told me not to worry, that in the night I had decomposed and I had been brought to hospital.
From that day on, everything changed for me. The doctors did all kinds of tests on me and referred me to a neurologist. According to them, what had happened to me was the result of an attack epileptic, something strange, by the way, given that in my family there was no history of epileptic people, or at least as far as I knew. From that day and for 2 long years my health deteriorated little by little. Of being a little girl plump and well-fed, I began to have no appetite and to see myself every day more emaciated and lifeless. Many times, before suffering these convulsions or attacks epileptic, I saw shadows of people in the house. My parents, by not being satisfied with the first conclusion medical, so they searched opinions from other neurologists. They even took me to see a neurologist in California, but they all came to the same conclusion: what I had was epilepsy. To make matters worse, and the saddest thing of all, is that my parents began to argue a lot between themselves, until they got to the point where they ended up divorcing. I, with so short age, was devastated. I believed that everything was my fault. My sisters also blamed me for everything. One day, after 2 years of being like this, a friend of my mom advised her to take me with an healer spiritual. My mother, being a woman very devout and believing, at first didn't like very much the idea. But once she couldn't find a solution anywhere, and seeing that my state of health was deteriorating every day more, made the decision to take me with that lady.
And well, that day we arrived at the house of this lady, the healer spiritual, and I remember that, although there were a few people waiting, the lady decided to serve us first. Some people complained to her about this action, but she told them that we had asked for an appointment a month ago. Obviously it was not true. I think she saw me so bad that she felt moved, and that is why she attended to us first.
The matter was, she made us go into a kind of consulting room. Told me to wait sitting on one of the couches that there had. And my mother went with her to an adjoining room. About 10 minutes later, my mother calls me to come in with her, and the lady very kindly smiles at me and asks me my name. When she was telling her my name, the lady placed her hand on my forehead. And I don't know what she did, but I think I fell asleep, because from then on I don't anymore remember anything. When I woke up, I was already sitting in the car going with my mom back home. I asked my mommy what had happened, and with tears in her eyes, she told me, "Nothing, daughter, stay calm, soon you're going to be better." I believe that from that moment on my situation began to improve. The next day, my father took me in his arms, and walking I carry myself me to a religious center that was about 6 miles away. And this, he did a round trip. I think it was like a kind of promise. At the religious center, a pastor welcomed us and a couple of people more. Took me to a kind of tub full of water that was in the back patio of the facility. They immersed me in that water, and while they did it I remember that they were praying. While we were returning home I was already feeling much better. I even felt hunger tremendous. I remember that while my dad was taking me back home sobbing, he told me, "I don't understand, why did I separate from your mother, if I love your mother just as I love you three?" The time passed, and luckily thanks to God and that lady, the healer spiritual, or the immersion that they did to me and the prayers they said for me, I began to recover from everything bad that I was. I no longer had any more seizures. And I never saw that type of shadows again. One day, after a few years, I was sitting outside the house watching my mom hang up the clothes. And it occurred to me to ask her what was it that the lady him had said when I was sick. My mom looked at me and told me that the healer spiritual him had said that I had stepped on a work of witchcraft made with land of cemetery, and that the work of black magic was not really for me, but rather it was for my mom, and that it was a work of death. She told me, which surely had been, that old dame of Jennifer, who was an old co-worker of my mother. But I took away from her that very wrong conclusion that had for so many years.
I remember telling her, "No, Mom, the who did that work of witchcraft was my grandmother, your mom. Don't you remember that here in this same patio? I got up from taking a nap, and when I left the house, I accidentally stepped barefoot on a mound of land."
At that moment my mom remained silent and thoughtful. Needless to say, that my grandmother never more returned to the home, after that time when I got sick. Today, at 39 years old and already an adult, I wonder how much evil you have to have in your heart to want to wish death on your own daughter. Anyway, believe that all the evil that she has wished on turned against her. Because my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer terminal, and she was suffering in a bed of hospital for 3 months. And given that my mother was an only child, no one went to see her or say goodbye to her in the last days of her life. Very well, friends, we have reached the end of the story. You can leave me in the comments what you think about this case, and if you have a similar story and want to share it, I encourage you to do so. I send a big hug to all of you, and have a great day.